We are recording the workshop for budget workshop, so we will get started and move on along. I'll let Mr. Scott start, and I've got a couple of things I'm gonna say, just kind of a recap, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, just to go back over April workshop a little bit is what we're gonna do today. We're also gonna steal a couple of our revenue stream ideas that we've talked about over the last several months. And then we're gonna continue our budget efficiency discussion. We've got some staff development travel on there, transportation information, custodial, a little bit about software, and then we've been talking quite a bit about our department budgets. We're gonna go over those in detail today, and then kind of what our next steps are for moving forward.
So since we're recording these, and sometimes people may not have heard this, how we got here, we always like to make sure we state it again. We have been dealing with the crisis in public school funding over this last year. With record surplus sitting down in Austin, we have not had an increase to the basic allotment since 2019. And you can see that Texas as a state ranks 42nd in per pupil state public education funding. So we're in this position with a lot of other districts in the state, every other district in the state of Texas.
And that might even be more.
Yeah.
Since
yes, very
that
very
article
likely.
was put out.
Mm-hmm. And these are just some headlines that, since we met last, that are coming, different headlines that are, and a lot of these are larger districts, but just some of the, just kind of shows that we are definitely facing some of the same things that other schools are. Schools that are losing enrollment or closing campuses, and programs and those kinds of things. Fortunately, we're not in that position. We are still growing. And so that is a good thing for us, that these are a lot of the headlines that you're seeing across the state.
And Denton ISD is currently at like a $20 million deficit.
Yes, yeah, I think that's right, they are. So we started out with a $4.6 million budget deficit. That funding cliff with the formula transition grant was huge for us here in Argyle. That is something that not a lot of districts understand, nor did our legislatures really understand. That's why we spent so much time trying to educate them in that process. That funding cliff is gone. We advocated for an extension. It didn't happen, so we have to accept that at this point and move forward. And so we were right at 4.6 million, with 3.5 being the formula transition grant. And so that will decrease per pupil spending for next year due to that piece. They're about 650 to 700 a student. And so we're working on building this upcoming budget for the 24-25.
Just for clarity.
Yes.
There was an amendment to extend the formula transition grant attached, or going to be offered to the public school finance bill. And I know Liz and you guys worked with the legislature.
We did.
I think Richard Hayes was
Yes.
going to offer that
Yes.
on behalf of Argyle ISD.
That is true.
The reason that didn't get extended is because they killed public school financing.
Right.
They didn't pass any bill. They have $4 billion sitting in the savings account. And that didn't pass because they stripped vouchers out of the bill, and there was a temper tantrum thrown over that. And they said if they can't have vouchers, then public school can't have any money.
Correct. You're accurate. And we did. We did get an amendment off the ground and rolling, and then couldn't get it any further. Yeah. So that is correct. And we are now gearing up for, we are still hearing some things just as recently as Monday that there could potentially be a summer session, special session, but there's no guarantee with that. So at this point, we're focusing on gearing up for the new one in January, the new 89th.
Okay, just again, these are recaps of everything we've been over in the past. This is just a slide or a visual of our revenue. Adding students every year, and we're funded on a per student basis, and our total budget is going up. So our revenue is going up, and we see that cliff there in 24-25, we're pretty stagnant with our estimated revenue. But had we done nothing, our expenditures would continue to rise. And that's what got us in this estimated budget deficit of $4.6 million, and where we started with. And so where we were at as of the last meeting that we had in April, we had projected savings of $285,000 in non-personnel, a little over $2.2 million in personnel, and then some reductions from the 23-24 budget of $475,000. For a projected savings of just around $3 million before we start with this budget workshop. And I think we even mentioned last workshop that was much farther than we expected when we first started this process. That was a lot farther than we thought we would get in 1 year. But we still are working. And so this is just, again, some things we're talking about today: staff development, travel, transportation, custodial contract, software, and then some department budgets. But we want to start with a couple of revenue ideas that we've talked about over the past several months. And if you'll remember back to even last spring, we briefly talked about a Vader, and then talked about moving that to either this year. Now we're talking about there's a good chance that this is an option that we need to consider either for this year or for next year. Vaders are in November, right? So they're attached to the general election in November. It would generate approximately $2.5 million for us next fiscal year if we went forward with it and if the voters approved it. Some timelines to remember on that are by July 5th, the board must select an auditor. August 19th is the last day to call an election. That just so happens to be our August board meeting date anyway, so we would not have to have a special meeting if we were to move in that direction. And then by October, we must publish the results of that, from that audit. I talked with our audit firm just as recently as today about timelines and what all is involved in pricing, and they're gonna work up some pricing for us just to have the information if we do decide to move forward with this. Because at some point we get a little bit more into a crunch of timeline that we have to move forward with. So this is where we would need feedback from the board about your feelings on this, possibly for this coming November or the November 25, or possibility at all for our district. This is again 7.7 pennies that we have remaining to go out and ask the public for. Similar to other districts, there's several in our area that have, across the state, there's been many, but recently in our area, I believe Louisville ISD just completed one this past year. I saw an article just today, Liberty Hill ISD, they're another growing district. They are a fast growth district. They're talking about going out for one possibly this November. I believe another local district is looking at it from articles that we've seen. Coppell ISD may be talking about one. I don't believe they're fast growth, but they're local. But we can go back and look at a list of, if you want to know who all has done one and where they stand and everything over the past several years. But,
One question for you. I know golden pennies, copper pennies, that's a standard terminology for you. But what does that mean? So meaning, would it increase the tax rate 0.077%, or is it 0.7? I mean, I don't know what that means.
it actually, you're adding 7.7 pennies to the tax rate on the M&O side. So,
I still don't know what that means.
Right,
And
so-
that to me says 7.7% increase in the tax rate.
no, it's not percent, it's
7
pennies.
cents.
So the tax rate is,
It's a buck or something.
So
correct,
our M&O tax rate went down last year,
over 18.
over 18
That's correct.
cents.
Yeah.
And so potentially, we're adding 7 plus back to that.
Right.
And let me also just clarify, the idea of the Vader is because of the current deficit budget issue.
That is correct.
I think there was some misinformation during this bond election cycle that this was being considered for other reasons, or it was getting thrown out there as if we hadn't been talking about this in the last couple of budget workshops, talking about this current deficit budget that we're looking at. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that this is to try to capture back around 2.5 million in revenue. And it's an option regardless of a bond or anything else.
This has nothing to do with our bond.
Yep.
There was significant misinformation spread, and I will agree with you on there, mainly through social media, regarding this topic. Again, we talked about this as early as last spring, when we mentioned it for this the year that we're in. We talked about it in every budget workshop that we've had. We've had that information all along the way. This is a consideration for us on our M&O side, regardless of a bond issue or not. It puts us, if you want to look at it, we're in the same boat as every other district in the state. There's a state funding process on the M&O side. When you talk with our legislatures, some of the questions they're going to ask about, when we're saying, well, we need more funds, they ask, well, do you have all of your pennies?
Right.
And our answer is no, because they want to say, well, then you aren't doing what you need to do locally to have all your funding. So there is some pushback from the state on that because we haven't.
Because we're efficient with our money.
Exactly.
It is 100% true. In the conversations I've had with the state legislators last fall, the question was, well, have you used all your pennies?
Right, meaning they want the local people to pay for it.
And
We're
essentially,
not
what,
going
and essentially what
Yes.
the shell game here is at the state level, we want to get credit for giving you a tax cut. And we want to send money back and we want to tweet and post. Look what the state did. We have a surplus and we're giving that back to you. Now, I would have a surplus if I didn't pay my bills either. And that's what they're essentially not doing. They're not paying their public education bill required under the Constitution and then bragging that they have a surplus, and then they give it back and they say, vote for me. I voted for the largest property tax cut in history. And then they're saying, but go get it back at the local level. Have you used all your pennies? So that's, I mean, it's,
So can I ask a question about that? So if we were to put this out there, we go July 5th, by July 5th, and we say, hey, we want to get the audit done. We get all this, and then there is I guess it's two questions. Really. If we pass it, if we go through this timeline and we get ready to do it, and there is an emergency session, and they do free up money, they somehow get their vouchers, but they agree to fund public ed per student the same level they're funding for private. We can pull that off. Can we pull it back?
Not after August 19th.
If you
But can
call
we
it-
just tell the community, don't vote no? We don't need it, right? I mean, I get frustrated because, like you say, they have a surplus because they're not paying what they need to pay. And when they don't pay, they want the taxpayers to foot the bill of what they didn't do, which the taxpayers are already footing the bill. So I guess the other piece is, let's say that we do it, and then the next legislative session, the community approves it, next legislative session, they up the funding. So now we don't need this. Can we go back? Can we lower our M&O rate?
We still need it. Isn't that what you've projected, we still need it even with legislative help.
Yes, along the way,
Depends.
we're gonna need it. And we'll get to the.
But maybe not
summary
all.
then.
Maybe not all
of
sudden.
it, But the board has the option, the board sets a tax rate every year. Okay, the only time you ask for voter approval for that tax rate is if you go over the maximum compressed rate plus any prior approved pennies, right? You can set it lower. You don't wanna go, can't go below your maximum compressed rate, which would be no extra pennies at all, because then you lose on both sides. But yes, you don't have to set it each year. I don't know of an example of a district that has done that, but in theory, yes, you set the tax rate every year.
But at the end of the day, the only reason we're considering this is because the state is holding us hostage,
Yes.
right? So we wouldn't have to be asking for these 7 pennies. We may have to ask for 1 or 2,
Right.
but we wouldn't have to ask for all of them
Right.
if we weren't being held hostage. So if they finally free that up, it seems to me like as a taxpayer, I would want somebody to say, hey, you supported us when we needed it, we're gonna give some back.
but the devil's in the details, because if it was the Senate bill that they were just gonna give us a $50 allotment increase, we need all of it. If it was the House bill where they were gonna give you somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 to $700 a kid, which would offset the formula transition grant discount, you may not need all of it. So it depends on what that
Yeah.
bill was.
I guess I'm talking more about, and maybe if we ever thought this, we would have to be very clear of what we're saying, but, you know, the numbers I've been hearing for public kids going to public-private school, wasn't it $10,000,
Yes.
$9,000?
10.
10,000. So I've got to the point where I'm gonna stop arguing about vouchers, just give us $10,000 a student, give them 10,000, hold them to the same accountability we are, and let's move on.
But they'll say you're getting 14.
Right.
They'll count all these other little,
They will.
then they'll say you're getting
Right.
14.
They'll
And I-
include your INS slide.
They will, and in some information that was distributed to some of us recently, there have been comments made at the state level as recent as a few weeks ago to within the last month that doesn't matter, you've got enough, we don't need an increase to the basic allotment. You know, that's the information that we're getting. That's not from our local legislatures, that's from a state level, in an interview that was given. And so, you know, there's still some contention out there that even if there's a special session, they've got to fight.
And they do have the opinion that these, are reserve funds, or what do you call it again? Our savings account.
Oh, fund balance.
Fund balance. There is this opinion out there that the fund balance in public education is bloated. That there's too much money in the fund balance, and the state is really trying to there are some people that believe we need to get those school districts to tap into that fund balance and bring that back down.
That is, yes, that is very much a conversation that goes on. There are some higher fund balances. We are not one of those. And when we get towards the end of projections here, you'll see where our fund balance is at and where we're projecting it to go to without any help. So,
I'd say based on Mr. Slayton's comment that we already have reduced 18 pennies prior years, also the fact that it is a vote, right? So I'd say personally, my opinion would be move forward with this because it is a vote.
Well, I think it gives you it's the only, to me, I don't know,
Yeah.
we'll get into this, but it looks like it would be the only opportunity to actually consider raises, teacher raises. I mean, you may have other things getting into the slide, but, I mean,
Yep.
I don't know how you do it. And that's what Louisville ISD did. They tied it.
So did Highland Park.
Highland, they tied it. They said, you pass this Vader, this is going to teacher raises.
most of the time, when you get down to that point, you've done all the reductions that you can, and you're still trying to give the raises, and that's typically what Vaders are around. Raises or security of some form that they're still trying to fund.
Yeah. And so with that in mind, I mean, I think, look, it's up for vote. Go vote for it. We get the $2.5 million.
Here's the rationale,
It's
which is a necessary rationale, but
We're gonna give that in the form of teacher raises. Large portion.
We met some families during our bond presentations and through the bond campaign process that asked us, what do we have to do to get our pennies? Like that was becoming a question, that they wanted them so that we could tie it to our teacher salaries and things like that. So we had people asking us about that.
So,
Go.
one last thing.
Yep.
So, the $2.5 million that this could potentially raise, right? You're gonna show us somewhere in here that we've gotten to $2.5 million deficit, but now we're saying it's gonna give us $2.5 million, brings us back to zero. But are raises still in that $2.5 million?
I've got projections that include.
But the $3 million we're in deficit now does or does not?
Does not include.
Yeah,
the
so
deficit.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm fine having a deficit budget as long as it can give teachers raises. But I don't want anybody to think that, hey, passing this gets us to zero in teachers raises. It doesn't do that.
It does do that.
It does do that.
So
remember,
we've got some
down
slides.
from 4.4.
We have some
They
slides.
have 39.
We have some slides that'll show you that.
Okay.
If we don't get to answer that question through these slides, then we'll come back to it.
Okay.
Are there any districts that have used all their pennies? And are they in a deficit
Oh, yeah.
under this now? So then what do you do when we come to another point if you've sold all your pennies and you have nothing to do to raise revenue? Like, what are the solutions?
You're going through the same processes we're going through right now, trying to find any budget efficiency strategies that you can come up with, any other revenue ideas that are out there.
Vote. Vote for
Change
public ed.
And really, it's for us to establish those staffing formulas now, so that we're making those conservative decisions as we move forward.
Like, as painful as this process is, ultimately it continues efficiency for years to come in the district and
Yes, it
sets
does.
standards and parameters for how to be most efficient with funds. So
That is correct.
effective and efficient, having strong efficacy.
So the next item, we're gonna let Dr. Jordan.
Can I ask one last question? So when's the decision gonna be made on Vaders? You said we have to make it by August.
You have to call for an efficiency, you have to select an auditor no later than July 5th. You can select one prior to that. So if that's a direction that we would like to go, then we can bring a recommendation to you to select an auditor at an upcoming board meeting and start moving to that process. It still doesn't mean you've called for it. You won't call for it until you adopt the tax rate, and the plan right now, the timeline to adopt that tax rate would be August 19th.
And
I
do we
would
have
think we
to,
were leaning that way to bring us.
Yeah, I would say bring it, because
is that,
it's just getting us ready if that's where we choose to go.
does there have to be an RFQ for the auditors, or can we use our firm that we've used?
I will check on that to make sure, but I believe we can use the firm under our current RFQ that we have for audit services.
Okay.
Is there a list that you have to use, or just as long as they're qualified?
If they're qualified to do your external audit, then they would be qualified for this. But there is there's a set of procedures that TDA has to go through the process of what's required in the sufficiency audit. And so we've started reviewing that a little bit more now to know exactly what we need to do. But in talking with several districts, what I'm finding out is they're using their external auditors for that process.
Okay.
Does that tend to reduce the ultimate cost because they have
What would
so much data on us already?
a lot of the information in that is comparing to peer districts.
Okay.
And so there's quite a bit of research there. So if we ourselves can do some of that research and provide the data, that could help with some of the costs. And that's kind of some of the discussions we're having right now. Okay. So Dr. Jordan is going to talk to you about the Scholar Program.
This is the limited open enrollment possibility we brought to you also through these workshops. So kind of thought about where we could best accommodate students, and 7th through 11th grade is the areas where we had that space. That particular number of students, 184 students, brings us to the amount that we would believe it would take for the teacher raise for this year. And so that's where that number has come from. If we divide that up between 7th through 11th grade, 35 to 40 students per grade level. But also wanted to put the number there that we do have 31 transfers, temporary transfers, as are families that are getting a house built and don't have all the necessary documentation yet. But those are additional students that will also be here next year. So we thought about some different criteria that it could include and made those changes for this slide. So first responders in our area, of course, police department, they already do have the opportunity to attend our school if they're in an adjacent district, but then also fire, EMS, any of our first responders. And then I also talked about any split or adjoining neighborhoods. Canyon Falls, Harvest, Country Lakes, and then Avalon is nearby as well. We would not provide transportation, and some of the guidelines we would set there is that they do have to have a clean disciplinary record and 95% attendance for the last 3 years. And then they will have to know that UIL rules apply if they transfer into high school.
So when you say, the first two are basically who you're gonna open up this to,
Right.
right? And you say employee of PD, fire, EMS. We have how many municipalities? 5? So you're talking about Denton, Flower Mound, Northlake, so the Denton, if you're an employee in Denton, that's gonna open it up to a lot of people.
If you're PD, well, PD already can, because that's by law now, but
Right.
fire or their EMTs.
Of course, depending on where you live, I mean,
Sure.
they might want to have the transportation here, but okay.
Exactly, yeah.
We've seen several communities that have districts that have opened up that to first responders, because ultimately those first responders are usually serving the students in this district and that community that you're already working with. So it's just kind of a way to pay that forward.
Don't believe it would require any change in policy on our part, because we already have had this in our district before, and it is mentioned in FDA, so I think we're fine there as far as policy. We have an application that's modeled after another school district that just kind of outlines the guidelines, provides a checklist to parents. But it is going to be a process if we're going to admit potentially 184 students. That's how many hundreds of applications will have to be reviewed. And so it is something that we do need to make a decision on to move forward so that we can get the word out there to the members in our community, start that process. Given that it's going to take them a few weeks to gather documents, because it does, and that's timely as well, because some of those things need to be signed by their current school principal to verify their discipline. Attendance usually is on a report card, but not discipline. So getting that word out to them, giving us time to review applications.
So based on your analysis, we will not increase expenditure because this is all gap oriented. We have the space at the individual grade level. And so this is just, and it's good for these students. It doesn't harm our current families or our current students.
Right.
And I think it's, you know, my initial reaction was negative. It's like, we're dealing with growth anyway. But this is educated growth in that you know where we have the availability and you're
Right.
limiting it to that. And if you're doing all that work, have you distinguished 35 to 40 students simply because that is the number that you're trying to get to, or is that the capacity that we have?
So that number 184 was based on the amount of the raise for teachers.
Basically the revenue.
Yeah, so I haven't gone grade by grade and looked at space available. So that's why it's kind of a range, and we can come up with a number.
I mean, my suggestion would be, if we're going to do all the work,
Right.
and we know it's a manageable program, why not set that at a capacity level versus at a targeted number? I mean, if you
Absolutely.
can get 3.5 million for the next 4 years from this, isn't that a positive?
Well,
You know,
and I thought, because we had a discussion, and I think you'd mentioned that this gives us some of that flexibility.
Right.
Where if there are a higher number of applicants in ninth grade that perhaps meet some of the requirements, and we have a little more capacity, then it's not necessarily saying, 35 or 40 per grade, and we're limiting it to those. This is roughly what it's going to be. That gets us to the number we're looking for. We actually have a little more capacity, but we're not looking to necessarily go over that now.
Not to add teachers.
Right.
right, and the whole thing would be,
Yep.
this is no extra expenditure.
Right.
It's a lot easier at middle school because we don't have electives. It's a little trickier at high school to give an exact number because they don't all take the exact same classes, right? So there's a little more freedom in their schedules. So we have to make some educated guesses there when it comes to, but we know what our classrooms can fit.
And that my only comment was kind of supportive of yours is, I wouldn't have us cap it
No. I
at an
agree.
imaginary number.
Yeah.
Cap it to where there's no extra expenditures.
Yeah.
And the UIL thing is the basketball star can't necessarily move.
Not
over.
for a year. I mean, they can come, but they
Yeah.
can't play varsity for a year anyway.
And that's just varsity athlete to varsity athlete?
Yes.
Do they have to be, listen, I appreciate that this doesn't create any extra cost expenditures on our part, and it helps us generate revenue. But I just think about it from the student perspective, whether it's from an athletic perspective, an extracurricular perspective, even a class rank perspective, right? You have kids that are floating right around the top 10%, and that means something to them with college, and 20 new kids coming in their grade and they get pushed out. I just don't.
Well, when they come in, they have to, what they bring in has to be on our weighted system. So that's the way it should be.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Right, but we're looking for those kids, right? We're looking for those kids with a disciplinary record, great, that's who we're looking for. So the kids at the top are the ones those kids are gonna get penalized.
But I don't, was the risk of and fear of that happening, I don't know. I mean, is that a reason not to do it?
We're here,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hear,
again,
the
I
idea.
appreciate an opportunity to consider something that doesn't cost expenditure but delivers revenue. I appreciate that. And I'm not saying that we don't end up ultimately doing this, but it's how it could have a negative effect on certain students.
The reason we're talking about it is because the primary source of revenue
I know.
is growth. I mean, it's
Right,
it's a
so
body.
it's not to say that couldn't happen to those kids anyway, right? If we didn't have this and those families just picked up and moved to Argyle. But that's within the parameters of normal school district operations, right? We're being forced to consider this because of state funding problems.
What I appreciate about it is it's a confined window. The max any student would be is 4 years as of today. Now we might tomorrow decide or next year decide, okay, we're okay to re-up this again. We probably won't. But That's what I appreciate about this. is
Do they have to renew
fine.
every
Do they have to reapply
Yes.
every year?
Yes.
They have to reapply every year.
For space availability
Right, correct.
And
But-
meeting the
criteria.
prerequisites and
criteria.
criteria.
Do you have any expectation of whether it would be,
Yeah, the likelihood.
yeah, that it would be, hey, yeah, we're gonna be turning people away, or, you know,
All I can
I don't have
base-
any idea what interest level.
Based on
Yeah.
the last time we did it and people were
Right.
sleeping on
They
the
were
sidewalk.
Yeah, I just don't
Were
think
you
that's
out
gonna
there?
happen. Yeah, I'm a product of this.
I think we
Case in
have,
point.
you know.
Oh,
Yeah, that, I mean, it's maybe a risk, who knows?
We're done.
We obviously have not
Yeah.
communicated anything because we
Yeah.
wouldn't wanna get people thinking that we were gonna do something. We have people asking us all the time, do you have open enrollment? We don't go into where do you live or asking you those questions, cause we don't have a process or policy in place right now for that. But, you know, we know that a lot of times we hear from families that buy in a neighborhood and think they're in Argyle and go to sign documents to close and realize they're not.
Yeah.
And so I think, that, you know,
You're gonna get Lantana's another, I mean, they have to go all the way to Guyer. It's a long, you
But
know,
we
it's
don't
well-
have-
They're not adjoining.
we don't have them in here.
Yeah. They're
It's
not.
the
But they're in the
neighborhoods,
city of Denton, but that would be.
yeah,
just
but we
part
have,
of that.
what we have is the neighborhoods that are already in Argyle but have a portion in another district. Is what we had in here kind of as
Okay.
an option. And then Avalon, of course, is in the town and it's sitting right beside most of our, I mean,
Yeah.
so that would
I
make
mean,
sense.
You
Could be
think
very
about,
vocational middle school.
you think about Country Lakes, the division, and in the past anyway, I'm not sure how it is now, but people would spend $100,000 more on a lot or a house if it's in the Argyle ISD. I think the same thing holds true within the Harvest line, and I'm assuming the same thing holds true at Canyon Falls, though I don't have that data. Meaning, so people who didn't spend $100,000 more and got something that's not AISD, their kids are going to Northwest High School, Denton High School, bigger high schools, and so they might, 184 of them might be very interested in crossing the street
Yeah,
and becoming part of this.
I mean, the Northwest has elementary schools in Harvest and Con Square.
And we're not talking about elementary schools, we're talking about
I know.
7 through 11.
What I'm saying is, like, I can see Country Lakes, I mean, cause they have to go to Denton High, which has been moved all the way north on 35, up on Bonnie Bray and Loop 288. That's a long way to go, for high school, and I think their middle school is even, maybe a little bit closer, so I mean, it's much closer to go to
And they've
Argyle.
had that conversation for years.
Yeah, I mean, they've always had to commute, even for elementary school, they drive by Hilltop to get to Bryan
Yes, they
Elementary. So, yeah, it seemed like it'd be attractive, but
I think we do think if we had ample amount of time to communicate, mailers, all the things, we would have no problem generating. I think as we get closer, like we are right now, we may not have this, it may just be a communication, like how many really realize it and it's already May. I think that would just be, the first year may not be as many as we think, but then word's gonna spread, it's gonna catch on, and we may have some in the middle of the year, that kind of thing coming in.
Have you gotten any feedback from teachers? Are they neutral
been-
on this?
We haven't really talked about it to anybody because it was too premature to do so.
Does the 1.6 comes from state funding?
Yes,
No property taxes.
that's correct.
it's 8,700 a kid times 184.
Basically, yeah.
And no property tax. So if we pass vouchers, do we get their property taxes?
Yeah, they should send us the 10 grand.
I'm just saying.
I know, Sam,
If we can only get
using
them to
logic.
write the bill that way, right? Okay.
Me personally, I'm with you in the sense it doesn't sit well, it doesn't seem right, so I believe in a growth district like us, but, you know, desperate times, desperate measures, you know, and
So this is something they have to reapply every year, and you can stop the program at any time?
Yes,
the
there's,
kids that are
in the
there-
application document, it has the revoking, the reasons for revoke it if necessary.
And then the kids that are here would stay and finish out their schooling, but you might not
Right,
take
their
more
choice.
in.
Oh, you're talking about in general, the program itself, we could do that at any point, correct? Yeah.
I mean,
And it even says in the application that at any point our numbers get to a certain level, you may be removed, like it's not a guarantee.
right, so I'm
year
thinking
after year.
capacity, yeah, things like that.
So the fact that they have to reapply every year, and this says 7th through 11th, does that mean from 11 to 12, we're not keeping them? They gotta go somewhere else for their senior year?
No,
No, this is the first,
No,
this
This
is
is
the
just,
year that they
this is the
enter.
first grades we're looking at.
Yes, they couldn't come only as a senior. They could come as a junior, they come in, yeah, they wouldn't come only as a senior.
When will we know how many? Like, what, would that be like July, August?
how many have applied or how
Yeah.
many been accepted? So I think we'll put some potential.
Like we said, like July 13th, or
July
June 13th. I
June
think if we could get it launched, we would try to do a first round. You look at it, cut off of June 13th and see what it looked like.
Notify families like August 1st. Like,
When have we decided on teacher raises?
We have that to talk about in here too.
Okay.
Don't read ahead.
All right.
I know it's a tremendous amount of work for you all to set this up, monitor, et cetera, I think the value is there.
Okay, some additional cost savings. Again, Dr. Jordan on this one.
okay. So we developed a rotation for our big professional developments that are offered throughout Texas. They often go between Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin as well. And so we're just setting it up like it needs to just wait till it comes back to DFW, looking at virtual options, making sure that we take advantage of those because that saves a lot of money. And if it's only offered outside of DFW or it's something that we consider valuable enough that we do need to send somebody, then we're gonna do that on a rotating basis between different departments. So I'd say in the past, it's been pretty open as far as there's a certain budget set from my department, budget sets on the campus, and we could say yes a lot, but we're just not in that position to be able to say yes every single time. So in order to make it fair, but make sure we're also continuing to get our professional development, we're coming up just with a schedule more so that everybody has the opportunity to attend professional development. But then the expectation is for them to bring it back to their department, their grade level, and share what they've learned so we can all take advantage of those opportunities.
Okay, so transportation. So we've taken a pretty hard look at our transportation department. Where can we be more efficient? What we can do? What are our needs? Because we know you heard me talk to you towards the beginning of the year that some of our routes were overcrowded, we're having a hard time staffing, those type of things. So some of the options we looked at, or one of them was a 3-tiered system. And what that means is currently, and for a long time, we've been on a 2-tier transportation system. You have elementary routes and you have secondary routes. And you need so much time in between those routes in order, your school starting and ending times. We're talking about potentially for 25-26, moving to a 3-tiered system. So you would have elementary routes, you would have middle routes, and you would have high school routes. And what that does is it reduces your routes up to 5 by looking at this, which would be a potential savings of about $125,000 on staffing alone. But then if you continue this through the future, eventually it reduces the number of buses that you would need to purchase along the way because you're reducing routes each year. So it is an option. We talked about it. It will change from when the first school starts to when the last school ends because you have to build in that timing difference between each one of those tiered routes. So that's where we felt like we didn't have that put together going into next year. We felt like this was more of a second year, 25-26, but it is an option to look at to move forward with.
So is the consideration to start elementary earlier than what it's starting now?
I think we put some sample ones out there, but we weren't far enough along to really,
Okay.
that
Because
needs
it's
some work.
very early.
It
If you
is
don't
early.
have elementary
So-
kids, it is very early.
Yeah, so my mind, to me, this looks very logical, but then, well, yeah, sure, do that, absolutely, have the savings. But you're saying it messes up your start times, or that,
And
It adjusts
It
them
adjusts.
some. There's some adjustment.
So right now, we need about 45 minutes between the routes, right? So the routes can get finished and then go start the route again and go through that and get the kids to school, or if you're getting them home, correct? So we know that between elementary and middle, we'll still need about that 45 minutes. Between middle and high, we think the time will be a little bit shorter, but we need a little bit more time to study that to know how much we can compress that. so that we don't have to make it, an extra 45 minutes that we build into that day. We want to know exactly how can we compress that, so we aren't adjusting those times as much at the beginning and the end. But right now, we have some early start times, and so it's difficult to look at starting those too much earlier than what we're already at. So it's something that we're going to continue to look at and work on for not this coming year, but potentially for 25, 26.
So crazy, just out of the box question, since the bond did not pass and buses were in there, are we okay right now for buses where we are?
I will, yes, for the immediate need,
Okay.
but that is something that we're gonna have to go back and take a look at where we're at and how much of that we have remaining and how many years that'll get us through, because, buses were in that bond.
Yeah, okay.
And that is a need. I just can't tell you off the top of my head which year that comes into play.
Okay.
You know, you mentioned reducing the routes by 5. As we build more elementary schools in a tighter community, we're probably reducing elementary routes, aren't we? Because
Elementary, so for example, opening JRE reduces some routes for next year at the elementary level.
yeah,
However, our middle and our high are not neighborhood schools, and of course, they wouldn't be the neighborhood for the whole
Right.
district, so you still have routes there.
so I'm
that
trying with more
different-
buses that are dedicated to the middle school and high school routes.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, our custodial, we outsource that and have for many, many years. And y'all know that when we did our bid last year, that price went up significantly. So we took a pretty good look. Mr. Leopard did quite a bit of research on this, of continuing with the outsourced custodial versus bringing that in-house. Some challenges that we feel like on an in-house custodial. We feel like we would need to start at $15 an hour, which is what our lowest pay is right now. We do feel like that brings some challenges in to bring the number of staff that we would need, and to continue. Typically in the custodial, and we see that even with outsourced, that is a high turnover position. It is a constant moving part. What we don't have on this is we feel like that could potentially trigger a human resource position, because of how demand that's going to create on that department. Right now, we have this figure without that. And Mr. Leopard also went back and renegotiated with our current company. And in the current contract that we have with them, they have a 2 to 4% increase every year based on the CPI, that they can go up. But they've agreed not to increase for 2 more years to keep the remaining costs. The only thing that we are adding is the JRE campus, and we had them bid that for us last year, so we know that cost. So if you look at taking their no increase in CPI for 2 years, the total outsource option for next year is going to be $1.64 million. We feel like the very first year that we would go into this, when you've got some equipment startup costs that you would need, it would take us about $1.83 million to start that. And then that would drop down, because you don't need to do the startup every year, that would drop down to about 1.65, very close to the outsourcing option in year 2. And again, I do see some challenges in that, but
That doesn't include
Maintenance.
a potential increase in the HR.
it does not include the potential increase in HR that we feel like they may trigger, because our HR promise.
The cost of HR and health and all that is in there.
The cost of the FTEs for custodial, what is not in there is potential need for another staff position in
Yeah,
HR.
is all that extra.
Right.
Is there anyone here who would recommend the in-house custodial?
No, and we
All
just
right.
went through, we just went through some, I mean, we just got
Yeah.
this new custodial last year.
We did.
And everything's been pretty good, I think.
We thought it would be, but after we put the pencil to it.
Yeah,
it
it's
wasn't.
just not.
So are you happy with the current custodial people in general?
So I went back and had Mr. Leopard reach back out to our campuses. They have a grading system that they do
All right.
on these. He's heard back from almost all of them most recently. The two campuses that were most unhappy with their previous company are happier and have been happier all year. There's always issues
Okay, yeah.
with any system that you're in any company. But what we're hearing is that there are less issues than what we had in the past.
I'm good with that.
Okay, and Dr. George's going to talk to you about our software review.
Yeah, just work with the technology department, and we just ran data, had them review all the different software we're using to see if there's any overlaps, if there's anything that's duplicated. The good news is we didn't find duplicated products. Something that we're going to start doing, and we have started doing, is that anytime a technology purchase is made, we are asking them to also submit the usage report with it, so we can determine how much is this being used, is it worth the cost? And that has been a good process. So we didn't find a lot of cost savings here, but just wanted you to know that we did review it and look through it to see if there was any potential for cost savings. But the good news is we were already efficient in this area.
Okay, departmental budgets. We mentioned over the past workshops that our departments were asked to do a zero-based budgeting this year. It's the first time that they've had to do that, and so it was a very different process for them to go through. They were asked to prioritize in 3 categories, of priority 1, 2, and 3. With 1 being you have to have it to open your doors, 2 being that you would like to have it, and 3 being it's just a little bit extra, right? We've gone through there and looked at each one of those. We don't feel like any priority 3s, that we would recommend any priority 3s at this point in time. I can tell you most of them self-reduced the priority 3s, and they just didn't put them down because they knew what process we were going through there, and they knew the chances of getting those weren't great. There were some priority 2s on there. After we've reviewed all of these, we would recommend all of the priority 1s and most of the priority 2s. We still have some work to go through on these priority 2s because I'm going to tell you not every single priority 2 is looked at the same across the departments, and we feel like there's some adjustment that needs to happen in there. But just to give you some ideas of how these departments came out, and I've got 2 slides breaking these departments out. One thing to note on this very first one, admin building. So there's one listed as admin building, one listed as district-wide, then we have finance, and we have superintendent. So from a very, very small district and getting to the point where we're growing and getting larger, these are categories that we've tried this year to really break out separately. Because as we're getting bigger, there are some differences there in that we would categorize. And so we've tried to move that around a little bit and make it a little bit better idea of what we have. So admin building shows a really large decrease. That is due to the copiers that we've talked about along the way and not having that copier cost in there at our level for next year. Athletics, I will tell you that they get what I call the gold star for the detail on their budget. They brought back quite a bit of detail and quite a bit of work on that. That is around a 6% decrease. Band shows 15%, but I want to remind you that the 23-24 budget had the uniforms in there. So if you take the uniforms out, they still would show a little bit of an increase, estimating a growing department there. Choir, we got under review there because I can't really look at that and tell you that there's any reason they should reduce it 40%. I think that's a little too heavy of a cut for them. I don't find any large one-time expenditures from this year that they would be cutting back. And so we still need to take a look at that and figure out, are we really giving them what they need? I don't think that it should be at 40%. I think there's some work that has to be done there. Communications, some of these departments like communications, we're just really looking at our, anything that's optional, supplies. Some of the categories that we have are software, different things that grows, those costs grows, and then we have to come back to what do we actually have. Basically staff department, travel, and supplies that we can actually bring under control. So you had a 10% cut there. Construction, it's a smaller budget, 73% reductions because there were some one-time things in there. Most of that is all out in the bond. Very little of that is in the local budget. District-wide, that's where our property casualty fleet insurance is. So that's why you still show an increase there. That's the biggest variable that we have at this point in time. The majority of our stuff renews August 1st, so we're a little bit far out for quotes. We are actually working on and with a company to help us look at what it might be if we went out for an RFQ. Is it worth it to go out for an RFQ, to go out to bid into the open market for this? So that could have some variable in it. The finance department, again, 5%. We're looking at basically travel and supplies there. Again, we still have to do the audit that grows every year. We still have to do some other things. HR and student services, same type of thing. They have a 9%. We're looking at supplies and travel, mainly there. Learner services, a much larger decrease. There's some one-time costs, and then they had a lot of that, the travel budget that she was just talking about, some of that reduction was in there as well. All right, maintenance department, that one is where custodial was at. So you still see a little bit of an increase with custodial for JRE added in there. Operations it's a smaller budget, it had some one-time cost in this year, and that's why you see a larger reduction. Police department, We have a vehicle, in this year's budget to purchase for the new officer next year. We don't have a vehicle in next year's budget, so if you took that out, it really wouldn't be that much of a decrease, because we are adding an officer for next year. But that's why you see the 24% on there, is when you look, it's not quite apples to apples each year. The Region 11 contracts, they'll actually come to the board meeting this month to look at. Those are mainly, that's determined based on either number of student, number of staff, or the size of your campus. And those are things that we contract with them for every year. So that isn't, every single one of those are increasing every year. Security department, again, same thing, supplies, travel that we're looking at there for a decrease. And then special education, it's a large increase at 26%. We still feel like we have some work to do there. Some of those estimates were done on just, we think the overall department will grow by this percent, and we think we've got a lot of work. So I think that'll bring it down a little bit, but we still do have some things to look at there. The superintendent budget, that's where you'll find some different legal fees and things like that in there that will, we keep pretty a steady budget in that, but again, same type of things, anything that we could look at supply-wise or whatever to bring down, we did. Technology, same thing. It's also dependent on how many computers we're estimating for the next year that are getting refreshed. That's a different amount each year. And so we have about an 8% decrease there. Transportation, we couldn't really find much that we could reduce there. The cost of fuel, we're having to estimate out, the number of miles traveled. Repairs is a significant number for us. And so that is a 1% increase that we see there. And then utilities is going up about 6%. That is with our estimate there for JRE addition to that budget. So overall, if you compare us from 23-24 to what we're recommending under total priorities 1 and 2, it's about a 1.4% decrease. Now, we had a planning amount that we started with because we have estimated that those budgets would increase with some things for next year. So our planning estimate there was actually at 10.3, so it's a 3.9% reduction off the planning estimate there. So again, this will fluctuate a little bit with some areas that we still have to tweak and some unknowns that we have at this time. But that is where the department budgets came in, and I do have to commend those departments for putting in quite a bit of work on this. This was, again, different for them to look at it in this light, and we asked a lot more out of them, and they all, for the most part, brought forth the information and really worked on that, and did a pretty good result, I think, in trying to reduce as much as possible. Some of these in what we call our non-personnel, we don't have the leeway to reduce when we're growing and we need the software, or you need this or you need that. Those are based on the total number of either staff, students, or campuses. So it's hard to go in there and go, hey, take a 20% reduction on the top, because not everything has that leeway to it. So some additional cost savings here. We've got our department budgets in here, and then we actually, we had a counselor that we're reducing based on attrition in an area where we felt that we did have by the staffing ratios, we had one more counselor than what was needed. So we're at $486,000 in efficiencies.
And that was based on a resignation.
Yes. So $486,000 additional cost savings. So just to wrap this back in, where we started, the savings we brought forward in March, in April, and then what we have listed for May. We also had some additional revenue streams that we talked about, some small things here along the way that we talked about last month. And then we updated our revenue estimates. So throughout the year, we get a little more information. The biggest thing that I can pinpoint to you under this, that brought this number up, is we have a fast growth allotment. We are a fast growth school. And in fast growth, there's 3 different tiers. You can be a tier 1, a tier 2, or tier 3. We find out in the spring for the future year what tier we're at. Well, last year was the first year that we come up to a tier 2. We've always been a tier 3, which means you earn less money. And so we were the last tier 2 school in. But because it's not based on not only on our growth, it's statewide growth, I put us back in a 3 to be a little more conservative. We are the last district in a 2 again. So we're able to bump up that revenue a little bit more because it is a higher tier. So I've redone our revenue estimates to about a little over $500,000. So that brings our budget deficit down to about $400,000. So that's where we're at prior to looking at compensation plan. And Mr. Hawksworth, does that answer the question that you had earlier?
I saw that 2.5 and then I thought, okay, yes.
Yes, okay.
It's great. It's amazing, actually.
Amazing work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a true staff work. This is a teamwork.
Yes.
We're talking with other districts, not everyone plays together with the team well. This one does. This took everybody really pulling together, really having buy-in, and you can't do that with just one person. This is everybody working together and pulling in the same direction, and that's what makes this happen.
What I like about what you've done is you kind of reset the mentality also. So that next year, I mean, really this is being exercised every year.
Right,
You know, in a true organization. Well, you kind of done the hard work this year, and now you got an easier process for next year.
System now.
It's not like it all goes back to,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean,
high
there
budgets.
is pain being felt
Yeah.
in the hallways, particularly in people that, you know, had positions that where they had to be shifted or offered different opportunities. And eliminating those positions impacted teachers because those positions were more support role based.
Yeah.
And so their job satisfaction is they're gonna be frustrated because they lost I think, you know, some of them said like a 504 in high school with Miss Jackson and stuff. I mean,
That's what I was gonna ask.
So, I mean, there is
Like,
pain
what's
that you
the
wouldn't-
sustainability of this?
Fair point.
Like, this is not with us operating ideally, like where
Right.
needs are all being met without really
Well,
having
and
people.
like
on all
I've shared to some that have asked some of those same questions, you know, one thing that happens when districts are growing fast, sometimes you don't have those staffing allocations in place and you're adding because you're just adding because you know you need things. And what we were finding is that while you had the same title, you were doing different things. We had no alignment in what was going on. So this allows us to kind of reset all of that, get everything aligned, figure out where our resources need to be so that as we begin to rebuild and put those things back into place, then we have consistent, aligned job descriptions and expectations across our campuses. Because we were finding that people were doing very different things and very different ways of supporting. Some direct student support, some not. And so that's what we were
so
trying to.
there's gonna be some positives that come out of a
Absolutely.
very negative
Yes.
situation.
Absolutely.
My
Overall
sta-
negative,
Mhm.
but we're pulling out
Yeah.
some positives.
Yes.
My statement is more for the state level, just so that they don't think
Yeah,
everything's
no,
right and
correct.
we're operating on a
Correct.
bloated budget. It's
Correct.
more that we're asking teachers to take on more roles, we're asking
Right.
people to do more with less, and ultimately that's gonna affect the classrooms and the students in them.
And not give them a raise that they probably
Right.
deserve.
And even the raises they get are not enough,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
And we're trying to get us to the point where I've heard some superintendents in other districts talk about, you know, going into next year, they're really looking at building the 25 budget on 19 funding, and they can't even use in their district the term do more with less anymore. It's we're gonna do less with less.
Yes.
We're going to have to start cutting programs at this point. And so that's, you know, we're trying to get all of this in line so that we don't have to do those kinds of things, because we don't wanna cut programs.
No, and we have extra classroom space at the elementary level. Again, we could have scaled those classroom sizes back if we had had money for teachers and made everyone's experience in that level better.
Liz, do you remember what's the 3% raise cost us? I know it's not specific.
Yeah, we're estimating, because we don't have the information from TAD yet, it's based on historical.
Yeah.
We're estimating somewhere between, I think 1.5 and 1.7 is what we're.
So you can truly say that Vader will cover raises. Like,
Yes.
where I jumped in earlier, an hour ago, I didn't think it would, now clearly it does, and then some.
Yes,
It not only covers raises, it puts that into the black.
right, and I've got
And
a
also
3-year
told
plan.
Mr. Westrom not to read ahead.
I've got a 3-year plan that will show you here in
Do
just
as
a
I said.
second, that'll show you the impact without it.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Mr. Daniel's gonna talk about a compensation plan.
So we've been watching what other districts have been doing, and it's taken a while. Early on, many districts weren't doing anything, and there's still one that's holding out. So we have 5 different districts that we've been kind of looking into through the news, websites, tweets.
Our competition sometimes.
These are all local, right around us, competitors. And so this is just a breakdown of what their percentage was last year for compensation, for raises, and then what they're planning to do for the next school year. And you've probably heard, some of these people are going into they have a deficit budget, and they're gonna go even deeper into a deficit budget with the compensation packages that they're putting together. So the biggest one is District C at 3.5, We have one at 0, and then one we don't know yet, and then of course we are yet to be determined. But we're 3% last year. So this is just to kind of give you an overview of what we've kind of seen going on around our area.
So, real quick, on District C, obviously it's more than they've done or did last year. It is, without saying who that is that a district that is having trouble retaining teachers, and so they're having to potentially?
That district needs a lot of teachers because of their growth,
Their fast growth.
hyper growth.
Gotcha.
It could also be they did 2% and now they're trying to make, everybody else did 3 and they're trying to make up for some of it.
Yeah, they need more
They're
teachers.
still in the
than
deficit
us.
problem we all are.
Yeah.
They're just choosing to go deeper, I think.
But they may not be an FTG school, they may not be hitting the cliff.
Correct,
Right.
and their growth is hypersonic.
I mean, from what I've heard, you say that the teachers that were being, or the support staff that were being asked to do something different next year, maybe go back in the classroom or whatever, were so gracious, and it's like whatever's best for the district, whatever's best for the kids, and not hearing anybody really complain in that sense, and they're willing to do what they know at the district as a whole, because it's all about Argyle, it's all about the kids. I mean, I'm all over raises because our teachers are taking a hit. They're taking a hit on several levels, and whatever we can do, and whatever combination of things that we can do, whether it's a Vader or extra revenue, or I'm all over those budget cuts are amazing, that everybody did that hard work. But I wanna make sure that we support our employees, support our teachers, in any way that we can. It's just, that's a priority for me.
And I'm with you, Leon. I mean, because I know the things that I feel in terms of what's going on in my personal finances with homeowners insurance and car insurance, and, and I know grocery bills. I mean, it is like, there's never been probably a time when they need a raise more than right now, because those expenses are eating in.
Their insurance.
Well, the next slide will show that even more.
If you have insurance through the
That's
school
right.
district,
Look at that.
here's a slide for that.
We just got this information.
last
So it's
Friday.
not a raise.
That's embarrassing.
Well, I guess.
No.
Yeah, depending upon the plan, we're looking at a 9 to 10% increase. Currently, our district contributes $250 towards a TRS plan, and we have quite a few of our staff that have insurance through the district. About half. And then we've looked at this in the past. This is just bringing this up again. This is another comparison with the same districts and their contributions that they pay towards TRS insurance. And you can see we're lagging behind in that area. Again, C is the, what you call it, hypersonic growth.
So what is it, I mean, does anybody run the numbers that if we contributed another $50?
We have 350 staff that take it.
So I can tell you $100 off the top of my head, it was $420,000, so.
Okay. Just
So
get
I'm
to my
gonna-
head.
Well, I'm just go back to the Vader generating 2.5. You said 1.6 for 3%. You had 350, the previous slide, 350 employees participating. Even if you did another $100, it's only 35 grand, right? Now, you may get more employees participating if you're gonna contribute that much, but
I thought it was
No,
350.
35.
350.
350
Per month.
people enrolled.
Oh,
It'd be per month.
Oh, per month.
Nice try.
Well, it didn't say that.
No, I
It
agree, I was
was-
thinking the same thing.
I was like 35,000, what are we
So
talking about?
$100 would be $1,200 per person, per year.
And so I'm gonna ask the same question I asked last year, that wasn't well received.
It still fits. It's a lot of money, but it still fits.
And it's just my more curiosity, I sincerely believe that teachers don't do it for the money. Okay.
Doesn't mean we should take a match.
No, but then I sit there and I go, what do the teachers really want? Do they want a 3% raise, or do they want us to add another teacher in section for second grade? Do they want a 3% raise, or do they want the support staff, the 504 person? I mean, is that a fair, I can't do both
Not right now.
right now. And I'm sure everybody would have a different answer.
They would. Yeah.
You have so
But I
many
wish I knew what, you know,
He's asking
Yeah.
for emails. Any teachers that are watching, he's asking.
I mean, what do you really
Send
want?
us an email.
Let us know.
Sort
Yes, you are. That's what you
Joshua,
said.
And so, I mean, cause I think there are probably certain teachers that say, hey, I'd much rather have that interventionist.
But again,
What would you
I
say?
think that's a personal,
It is, it's.
Sorry, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
I mean, I don't mind it, can I speak? I can, we were kind of.
Oh,
talking
I'm
about
sorry,
it.
I'm not supposed to ask them.
Am I supposed to?
Never mind.
We can't.
Ignore
I'll send an
me.
email.
Ignore me. Send an email, yes.
Say Craig.
Yeah,
Send it to me.
Send an email.
I do think though, at some point, you can't not do the raises because then you set the whole pay scale off.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, because then you're not.
And you're
keeping
impacting
that.
their
I mean,
retirement.
that's already off, but you
Yeah.
make it worse.
Yeah,
And
retention's
and that's a
important.
permanent thing because you
Yes.
build on
And
it
it,
every
and it's the
year.
retirement piece. I mean,
Right.
we're all under-
let's look at what's a 3% raise on average? $1,500.
Yeah.
Was it
Across the board.
1,900 last year that we gained?
So,
19, I think.
so
is what
even
we-
just increasing contribution to health insurance right
Mhm.
there.
Right.
I
Yes.
mean, that's helpful. I'm not saying that offsets the raise whatsoever, but it's like,
It's still money in their pocket.
Well, I would say for this year, it's one or the other. You know, I put the priority on the raises versus this, but if we can't do the raises, then you
Well,
probably, I
because
think
you
it has to be,
still have-
it can't be both this
You
year.
still have all those
My
other
suggestion.
employees that aren't part of the health.
It's only 4.
About half of us. It's
Same
about
here.
About
half.
half of them, and if you go the
And I
health
did.
thing,
I
then
actually
you're,
did.
you're leaving out all
But
those.
I'm sitting there going, if I'm a third grade teacher and I got some behavioral challenges, I don't want the $1,500. I want the support that's gonna come help me get this behavioral challenges or help me with the, you know what I mean? And so,
but that's a teacher looking at that may not have personal financial
Sure.
things going on versus a teacher that's like, I'm a teacher, I'm gonna, check in every day, check out every day, regardless, but I'm struggling at home and I could really use that.
so at the end of the day, the question to me then becomes, what is going to help us retain the teachers? And I'm saying, you guys are saying it's gonna be raises.
And Liz,
That's gonna,
I know we talked about like, in regards to salary study, like doing a TASB salary study and where we're at in regards to that versus does it make sense to do a lump sum 1 year and not necessarily change the base versus changing the base?
And when we, Mr. Daniel's still waiting, I think, from TASB, he's gonna get the information back later this month to him. And when we have that, we can easily do some comparisons of lump sum, where does our pay scale stand in comparison to others?
Right.
And if we're good with that, then what combination, if any, or is it just lump sum, or any type of combination that we wanna look at?
Because it's a balance, like we definitely want to not only be a competitive district in regards to pay, but in regards to retention as well and
I would throw this out. This sounds cold-hearted. But are we having a retention issue right now? Are we having a hiring issue right now? Or do we have a big enough applicant pool?
No, we're still.
Yeah, we're-
pulling-
Then
still-
why are we searching for issues? I'm sorry.
I don't disagree with you, but I would say in a situation like this one particular thing, you can see that it's an issue. We're not searching for it, it's there. Why not do it before it becomes an issue?
Well, yeah, and
You don't want the
just, you can't take it
teachers.
for granted either. I mean, just because it's
Yeah,
working
I'm
now.
not saying, I don't think we're in a position to do both, like, I think you do one. And you said 350 people participating in insurance, what's that mean now? How many are not?
About half.
About half.
About half,
So raises are gonna affect,
everybody.
you're gonna, right, that's what I would do. But I think we have to be cognizant that, hey, right now, in our comparison group, we're the lowest out there.
You can also do a compensation package that includes a little bit of, the package could include some of everything,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't have to be just one or the other.
I mean, the thing I like about this whole process, like we said before, is, I mean, we're drilling down to the bare basics. And these are things that we're looking at that we may not have looked at so intensely and so quickly otherwise. And, you know, we're getting it's all the efficiencies, it's all the information. And I think just moving forward, it's just great data, great stuff to have, you know, for us to be able to, you know, move forward. And when we have the freedom, if the legislature helps us out, which would be very nice, we get back to that point where we can add back our people and make sure we give the raises or do something about this. I like the fact that we have this baseline data. We have this all here, and it's like, what can we do about it? And how can we help our teachers? How can we support them? And not just teachers, but any employee that's in the district.
And we're getting teachers in our applicant pools because of who we are, and because of the parent involvement we have, and because of the kind of kids that we have.
Yeah.
They want to be in Argyle, and so recruitment I mean, you know, you never want to think that you're not ever going to have an issue, but we certainly have not had an issue trying to find good quality applicants.
No, they're coming from Bigger Bean, they're coming from Louisville, they're coming from Northwest.
And we've had retirements, but you know, that's just part of it. People that goes in phases too. You have larger groups of retirements at times, that you won't have the next year. And so a lot of times you're looking at, you know, that does ebb and flow as well.
This is a big year for retirements, as far as the numbers go.
I know you will. Your whole family.
Okay, so we've talked to you all along that we're gonna give you a 3-year outlook, right, that this was a 3-year plan. So, what we wanna look at first is, this year compared to next year. So this is the amended budget as it stands today. Just some highlighted data there. And what we're currently seeing at a little over $1 million deficit. What our beginning fund balance was for this year, and what our ending fund balance would be is if, you know, we went exactly with the budget. That would leave us with, we're at 2.8 in operating months. The preliminary budget for 24-25 with everything we've looked at so far. So you've got 2 lines there. One is without a compensation package, one has a compensation plan. And again, a compensation plan is not exclusive of just raise or interest necessarily, it's the entire plan. So what that would change is the deficit that we're looking at the end. You have 400,000 and a 200,000, and again, that number, that compensation plan can change. We just had to pick a number to start with. Gives you what the beginning fund balance would be from the ending this year, and what that would do to us for the projected ending fund balance, and what operating months are your 2.5 for next year.
And what's state requirement?
Theirs is 2.
2.
We have internally tried to work off of 3, but we know, we talked about quite a bit, that we're gonna go up and down for a little bit.
Okay.
And is that enrollment based on projections, or does that include open enrollment option?
This does not include either option that we talked about today. It does not include a Vader, and it does not include the Scholar program.
Okay.
This is based solely off of our demographer's data. And down at the bottom, you'll see that, you know, projections only, and they're based on assumptions presented. There's lots of assumptions in this data, lots of things that can change in this data, but this is where we're at right now with the best information that we have. Now, if we take that and look at the next 3 years with that same data, and I had to bring forward one of those lines, either compensation line or not, so I brought forward the compensation line, and we take that out to 25, 26, and 26, 27. I don't have a compensation plan in either one of those moving forward. So just some baseline data.
But you don't have an increase in salaries for 25 and 26?
No, this
In
is just
these numbers?
this is just baseline
So
data.
basically, we're saying no raises in these 2 years.
I'm just giving you baseline data. That's not saying that we wouldn't do it. I'm just saying this
Right,
is the
but so
baseline.
if we didn't, we're still leading there.
Right.
Okay.
Remember, this doesn't have the Vader information in it. It does not have the Scholar program in it. And this is based on the best information that we have at this point in time. I can tell you the M&O tax rate there is based on the statewide data that we have at this time. That data updates every year, so that threshold updates every year. Again, this is the baseline data that we have. Rolling that forward, we would be pretty much balanced for 25, 26, and then 26, 27, we would start that recovery process. Again, if you look at your operating months down at the bottom, we drop down to 2 and then 1.9, and then we start recovering. But this does not have the compensation plan in it for the next 2 years, but it also doesn't have the revenue options that we have.
And that's actually assuming that we get increased funding, or is it still the same funding?
Same funding, no
But
legislative.
it's just growth.
Right.
This is growth.
Right, increasing the revenue. So I'd be challenged to think you can actually reabsorb the 1.5 million or 1.2 million into the fund balance.
Yes, so again, these are
Yeah.
the best assumptions we have at this point in time. As data changes, we update everything. And this is as is. So this brings us back to why we were asking you for direction on a Vader and a Scholar program, and if there was any appetite for any one of those, which I think y'all have answered that already in this.
But I don't think this, from what I'm seeing, we don't necessarily have to do both. Right?
Just,
I mean,
let's get
if
through
we
the other
do-
slides, because again, this is showing
Yes.
zero.
I understand that,
Right.
but you know what, if you put the compensation plan in there and you know what Vader delivers, then.
So this
you don't have to-
also,
You don't have to.
You don't have a
go-
guarantee that Vader gets
I
done.
was gonna say.
Right.
we're
That's a
gonna,
big gamble.
I'll remind you that we are opening campuses along the way.
Right.
At some point, we will be. We still have, we're opening elementary 4, we're opening middle school here in a couple of years, and after that, elementary 5. So growth is coming. This is a tight budget as presented. Like we talked about, we've made a lot of reductions, and that's continuing those reductions.
Liz, not to future trip, I'm sorry, but on your 26-27 preliminary budget, going below the 2 months threshold, what does that mean for our credit rating? What does that mean for?
So anytime we look at a bond rating or credit rating there, we do have to talk about our M&O side, and they want to know what is, do we have a surplus or a deficit? What's happening? Are we growing? Are we working our way out of that? And so we have to go through a discussion, and that plays a part in our rating. As far as from TEA's standpoint, they're looking at your fund balance on your first rating, and they're also looking at your cash flow, which is separate from your fund balance. They're looking at, do you have a minimum cash flow? And we could be downgraded on our first rating based on that. That's 2 years out. I would be hopeful that we could work a little bit more into not being at 1.9 at that point, but based on the best data we have, that's where we'd be at this point in time. That's why
And this is with no catastrophic expenses.
Right.
that is correct. These spring storms that are coming through, a large hailstorm, and it does
Right.
something that, we have a very significant insurance premium there.
Air conditioners.
Deduction, air conditioners, yes.
Flooding,
If the,
motor going out on the well.
if the future board
This is
agrees
just as
to,
Sorry.
a Vader and if we suggest tying it into the raises, how does that work in that we need to start giving the raises in July, right? But we won't get it.
So you can present a compensation plan to the board to approve with pending outcomes. So if there is increased revenue at some form, legislative, whatever that, if these marks happen, then the compensation goes into effect.
And is it backdated then?
We'd have to make sure that we've done everything, as long as you approve it prior to the contract starting, that it could happen along the way if these markers are met.
Well,
So
I'm
we
a
would
pretty
still,
easy sell. If you present a budget like that says if these certain things occur, then we can get these types of raises, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I'm in.
I think you have the community support too.
I mean, I don't know if you give a little one, and you say we can get more, or I don't know, however you want to stage it, but I'd need an easy sell.
The value of a teacher is nothing that we will ever be funded for to be able to compensate them for what they do. And so,
completely agree.
but this is me speaking as a community member, not as a
Biased.
husband of a teacher, but like being able to provide for our teachers as best as we can outside of retention or outside of attracting and
Did you
hiring.
sleep on the couch last night or something? Is you trying to teacher? I don't know, man. I'm staying out. I'll let you-
Anyway,
I'll let
I
you
just
stay.
think that educators in general have been put down by our legislators, been put down in general as it comes to equity for the amount of work that they do and what they're compensated. So
She forgives you.
anything that we can do. I'm so glad this is recorded. You interrupting me.
Well, just as educators in general, We keep taking the hits and you can't fight back,
Yeah.
because I mean, you're professionals. And so that's just what you do, and that's what our teachers have to take it just.
It goes back to what
just as
Josh
much.
said, vote matters. Research
Right,
your vote for the
absolutely.
vote.
We're not unionized, we're not going to
Correct.
strike, because just like Mrs. Arthur said, like, that impacts the kids, that
Right.
impacts the why, and no one wants that. So,
So, I just have to say, I don't disagree with you. The compensation plan for the teachers is extremely important.
Yeah.
And then I take that down further. We have some hourly paid
Yeah.
employees that are
Yes.
starting at $15 an hour.
Yes.
And, you know, it goes all the way down to that. It's very difficult to make ends meet at this point in time. So, it's important all around. Historical fund balance is just some information for you. I broke it down by the percentages we use months operating this time, where we've been at in the past 5 years. And then moving forward. So, directions needed for the May 22 board meeting. I think we've talked this through, the scholar program. I think we have some direction there.
To bring that back.
Yes, to bring it back on May 22nd.
You're good.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, you're rolling, take it.
The compensation plan, really direction for that. That typically for our district is in June, but it could be also at a future workshop. We just gave a, example. If we looked anywhere from a 1% to 3% midpoint, not to exceed a certain amount, we'll have more information by that point to know if what I'm telling you based on historicals, the 1.6 is a good number. Would that include some insurance adjustments in there as well? We could bring you a package to you at that point in time.
it's a true GMP, Mr. Duffenbach.
Kind of some direction for the 3-year outlook regarding the budget deficit. That includes kind of direction for the Vader as well, which I think that we've talked about that. Do we begin the audit process? I think we've got our direction to bring you and some audit information back to a board meeting soon. And so that's kind of what we were looking to accomplish in this meeting. And then Dr. Carpenter was going to talk to you about this.
Yes, so, we'll take that.
Yes, sorry.
So obviously, we've talked a little bit about the legislative sessions coming up, all of the things. We are about to re-kick off our Take Action Argyle. We are working on our website right now. We have been able to upgrade some things on that. So these are just some screenshots because it's not live yet, but to make it easier for our constituents, for our parents, our community, for our teachers. I don't have the pictures on there, sorry. They were on there later. They'll be on there whenever we put this back out there. But we have, on that website, you're able to do an email version, you're able to do a phone call version. And the nice thing about the phone call version is you can go put in your information and based on your address, you hit start call and it'll go to their office and call you back and you're able to talk to them from the office, especially if you call during normal business hours. On the email, if you put your address in, it goes directly to your to your legislature, your representative. So before, we weren't able to do that, and we are now. So we're getting ready to launch that again. We have got to continue getting our word out there. We know after the primaries, we have one new representative for sure, in Mitch Little. Mitch, I've been in contact with him some, trying to get him to come in and meet with us. We haven't been able to meet up yet. I've been promised that he will do so. And then we have a runoff with Lynn Stuckey. And so whenever that happens at the end of May, then we'll know who that representative is going to be. And of course, we have Richard Hayes. So we will, and Senator Parker. So we'll continue those efforts. We will do a push here at the end of the year, and then we will revamp and ramp up when the year starts because they're already working on bills before they ever call session. So just wanted to make sure everyone knew that this had not gotten put on the back burner. Okay, so we have made it from February to this point, and I think you kind of know we talked about considerations and we know what our next steps are. And then we, right now, do not have additional budget workshops scheduled, but if we need to, we will do that. I think we have gotten as far as we can that we can handle everything else through our regular meetings.
Well, thank you guys. I know those are, y'all have gone on every campus, had to deliver somber news and difficult messages, and it's not fun.
I
It
think
takes good leadership to do that, so.
I think what we've heard from is, being able to have those conversations face to face and let them ask questions or hear it and then come back and ask questions later so that it's not getting lost in translation was incredibly important. Been in places where it didn't do that and you learn the hard way sometimes. And so that's how you build relationships with people is you're just honest with them and you bring them along with you the whole way as part of it, so. Appreciate our teachers and our principals and our paras and everyone, all of our operations teams, they've given us their time to come in and go over some of these very things that they really shouldn't have to worry about.
Yeah.
They really shouldn't.
I echo Mr. Westrum's comments, and this will be the last time I can actually, I can't vote, I'll give an opinion. So, the way I see this is that we're dealt a $4.8 million budget deficit because of the funding cliff and the lack of increased funding from the state. Over the last, what, is it 5 years, 6 years?
19.
So you all dug in, looked at every corner, and you found savings and extra revenue potential that took that 4.8 million down to 400,000. But in so doing, we couldn't give raises. And so if we did, then we're another 2 million down. But with the scholars program and the Vader, even if we could tie that Vader into an increase, I think that's the wise thing to do. Because that actually, the Vader protects you for the next 2 years also. So, and it's not a substantial tax hit with the 7.7 pennies. So
When we gave 18 cents back.
when we gave 18 cents back. So, yeah, I think great work, and I think that the two viable options of significant revenue impact, I think are viable.
And I want to thank you for your hard work and working with, everybody from the ground up to have that chart, to have, the percentage as far as when you do, zero-based budgeting is a tough concept for a lot of people. And the fact that you were able to, the time that you guys have spent to communicate with every single department, every single campus is incredible to me that you've done that and you come back to us. And it makes it so much easier for us to make our decisions because we know the value of the data and the depth of the data that you've given us. And I know it took a lot of time, a lot of hard work, and I appreciate that very much.
That's all we have.
Is that it?
That is
Okay.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
503.
Good job.
503.
Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.